Hi everyone, this video covers the mechanics surrounding the Roses of May Lufenia fight, which comes from Beatrix's Lost Chapters. So in this video I'll be covering some of the key things that you should prepare for and countermeasures to bring, as well as potential key characters and party setup that you can use. I will also be including a timestamp in the video description that you can jump ahead to the section that you're interested in, and I will also be including links in the video description of videos of my clears in this stage that you can refer to as examples. So coming to this stage is just a single wave of the Merilith Gloria, and they don't have a lot of resistances except for Dark, although they are immune to HP attack disable. Overall, in this fight, there are three things that you need to take note of and prepare for. First of all, I will start off with the Lufenia Orb, as always. So the Lufenia Orb this time is a little bit tricky because, first of all, it only starts off at 69% health and below. So for the first 100% to 69% health, you actually have your honeymoon period where there is no Lufenia Orb present. So during that stage of the fight, it's all about doing slow and steady DPS while preparing for the eventual appearance of the Lufenia Orb. However, once a single Merilith Gloria hits 69%, the Lufenia Orb will appear on that boss, and likewise when the next Merilith Gloria hits 69% or below, the orb will appear on her. So the orb is tied to each individual HP threshold of the Merilith Gloria. So over here you can see Merilith Gloria A just hit 69%, so the orb appears at a count of 15. Orb isn't there on Merilith Gloria B because she is still at 70% health. However, after this attack by Gladiolus, it brings her down to below 70% and the orb appears. Now, when I said the orb is a little bit tricky, there's a few reasons for this. So first of all, the orb will never disappear. So once the orb appears at 69%, it appears with a relatively low count of 15. And it has the usual tick down, so -1 during a player action and -2 during the boss's action. And the orb will never go away the entire fight, and there is no way to pause the orb counter as well. So you can imagine it is already a little bit tight to deal with the orb. In addition to that, the only way to increase the orb count is to dispel buffs. And dispel buffs here is a term that I use loosely because any action that can remove the buff from the boss. So for example, Beatrix dispelling, Vanille dispelling, or if you have Cloud with his Wall of Illusion weapon dispelling, or for example if you have characters who can steal buffs such as Baltier or Yuffie stealing the buffs away, those will also increase the orb counter. As long as there is a way to somehow physically remove the buff from the boss, it will increase the orb counter by 10. However, dispelling the buffs only increase the orb counter on the bosses that you dispel on. So for example, if you only have single target dispel and you only dispel one Merilith Gloria, the orb counter will only increase for that Merilith Gloria. Likewise, if you increase if you dispel the buffs on both Merilith Gloria at the same time, so for example using Beatrix's LD, because both bosses are dispelled, the orb counter will increase on both. Orb counter will increase by 10 each time you dispel a buff, and it doesn't matter how many buffs you dispel at that turn. Whether you dispel 1 buff, 2 buffs or 3 buffs, you will only increase the orb counter by 10 in a single turn, and the orb caps out at 15, so it still makes it a relatively tight orb counter considering that the orb is present from 69% all the way down to 0. Okay, so here you can see both bosses having 5 framed buff each and 1 debuff, and Cloud uses Meteor Rain, which hits both bosses and dispels 1 buff from each boss, and by doing so it increases the orb counter on both bosses. Whereas here Cloud uses his AA, which is just a single target attack, and it only dispels buff from one of the bosses, and it only increases the Lufenia orb counter on that particular boss. The other bosses' Lufenia counter still remains at a very low count of 2. You do not want the orb to count down to 0 because 0 essentially is a game over, because it will automatically set your entire party's HP to 0 as always. So therefore, first of all, the key requirement here is you need to have some way, shape or form to remove buffs from the bosses. Now regarding the buffs on the bosses, there are some key mechanics surrounding how the bosses buff themselves as well. So each time the bosses hits 69%, 49%, 29% health respectively, they will cleanse all debuffs they have on themselves, including frame debuffs, and they will grant themselves 6 framed buffs. So essentially giving you fodder to dispel at the 69, 49 and 29% threshold respectively. So over here, Beatrix uses Claim Hazard, which brings down one boss to a 69% threshold, and although the orb only appears on one boss, do take note that the debuff cleansing and the 6 frame buffs will be done by both bosses the moment any of them hit the 69, 49 and 29% HP threshold respectively. In addition to that, each time the bosses takes a meaningful action, so some form of attack, they will gain a buff, a framed buff, because every single attack in their arsenal grants them some form of framed buff. So this guarantees that there is always some form of buff for you to dispel to increase the orb counter. Which also means that so long as you bring some form of dispeller in your party, you should be able to keep the orb count relatively high the entire fight. Okay, the second thing that I want to talk about is their recast ability called Kakara of Effacement that they will use when they reach a full recast bar. Now essentially, unless you have some way of mitigating HP damage significantly, their recast ability is more or less an instant death attack as well. And the reason for that is that when they first use their recast ability, they will battery themselves to roughly 33,000 bravery points, followed by unloading a group brave attack, which usually leads them to getting more than 40,000 brave. They will then unleash this 40,000 plus brave into a form of HP attack that deals 100% splash to your entire party, which means that if they have 40,000 brave, each party member will take 40,000 HP damage. Right after this, they will immediately follow this up with another brave and HP attack, which usually deals only about 1 to 2,000 HP damage each. So in total, you will be taking more than 40,000 HP damage per character, which at this stage of the game would normally KO every single character in the game, even with slight HP damage reduction, such as Gladiolus reducing HP damage taken by 20%. Okay, so this is a good example. Here I'm using Beatrix's Holy Knight Protection to protect me against their recast ability. So if you pay close attention, they first battery themselves to more than 30,000 brave. They will unload this in 100% splash damage, and then followed very quickly by another follow-up HP attack designed to kill off characters with last 10 passive. So here you can see it happening again. There are 2 distinct HP attacks in the recast ability. The way to get around this is to have some form of buff or debuff that can completely negate HP damage. So given that this is Beatrix's synergy event, the best example here would be the Holy Knight Protection from Beatrix's post-EX move, which grants her a 1-turn frame buff that reduces all HP damage taken to 0, so effectively protecting you from the Kakara of Effacement HP attack. Another example possibly would be using Reno's Pyramid debuff. It will reduce all Brave and HP damage done by the boss to 0, thereby also allowing you to survive the hit. So any other form of HP damage mitigation similar to this will work. Of course, characters who can self-mitigate damage, so for example, if you have Gladiolus and he uses his LD, he will take 0 damage from this attack. However, he will not be able to protect the rest of your party from taking the 40,000 HP damage just by using his LD alone. Do take note though that blindness and evasion will not work because the recast ability is a guaranteed hit. In addition, last stand passives, so good example here would be Freya's last stand passive to the party, will also not work. And the reason for that is that this recast ability comes in the form of 2 back-to-back attacks. So you will first take 40,000 roughly HP damage each, followed by, which if you have last stand would reduce your HP to 1, but then you will immediately take roughly 1 to 2,000 HP damage per character, which will then kill off your characters with last stand. So again, evasion and last stand passives will not work. The third and final thing that you should quickly take note of, and compared to the first two, I think the third one is relatively minor, but it's the fact that the bosses do have some noteworthy HP attacks in their arsenal. On top of that, as I mentioned earlier, every single attack that they do will provide them a framed buff. So the thing to watch out for, first of all, are the Pouring Rods attack, which is a group Brave and HP attack, which isn't too dangerous as long as it doesn't break your entire party. You should be able to survive, and if you have some form of healing, you can heal up immediately after. The other dangerous HP attack is the Abyssal Whirl attack, which they tend to use quite frequently once they hit below 30% HP. So when they're in the raid and they're targeting a single character, you have to watch out for this attack. It's very similar to their Absolute Chaos attack, where they will deal a flurry of brave attacks to a single character. However, they will end this attack with an HP attack, which if this flurry of brave attack, if it breaks any of your character, will usually lead to that character taking 20 to 30,000 HP damage and most likely dying from the attack. So you do need to take note of this as well. In addition to it also granting itself a framed buff after this attack. Okay, so coming to the overall strategy and some key characters and examples of party composition. Strangely enough, the easiest way to get around this Lufenia fight is to actually not use Beatrix. If you think about the 3 key mechanics being the Lufenia Orb, the very deadly recast ability, and the bosses having very dangerous attacks, if you employ the turn delay, turn deletion strategy with characters that have deletion and delay built into their kit, such as Lion, Lightning, and Cloud, you can actually bypass 2 of the 3 mechanics already, being the deadly recast ability and the deadly attacks that the bosses have that also grant themselves buffs. In fact, if you use Lion and Lightning alone, you can already indefinitely delay the Meredith Glorious because there's only a pair of them, so Lion can focus turn delete one, and Lightning can focus to delay the other. And if you have, say for example, Cloud as a third party member, he provides a lot of breathing room because Cloud's LD also delays for 2 turns, and his Cross Slash Plus is a guaranteed paralysis, which also buys you some additional turns. So then what about the Lufenia Orb? It appears at 69% and only has a count of 15. Well, since the bosses grant themselves 6 frame buffs at the 69, 49 and 29% threshold, this also means that you can control the rate at which you dispel the buffs to always ensure that the Lufenia Orb stays at a very healthy counter. For that purpose, you want to bring in characters that do not have mass dispel, such as Beatrix's LD, which will dispel all 6 buffs, or Vanille, who can dispel all 6 buffs at the same time, because this only gives you 1 chance to increase the orb counter. Whereas if you bring in characters, for example Cloud with his World of Illusion weapon, Cloud's World of Illusion weapon only dispels 1 buff at a time, so if the bosses have 6 framed buffs, it actually provides you up to 6 opportunities to increase the orb counter, which is plenty given that the bosses will refresh the framed buffs at 3 different HP thresholds in the fight. So it is a very cheesy way to employ turn deletion and delay, and I will put a link in the video description of an example where I defeated the boss before they get to do a single meaningful action. So they were either turn delayed, deleted or paralyzed the entire fight, and because they didn't get a single action, they actually died before they get a full recast bar in the first place, which fully circumvents the recast attack as well as the deadly attacks that they have. So that I think is the most straightforward strategy in this fight, and again you can check out the link in the video description to head over and see how it's done. If you want to go the more straightforward route of just powering through, that's where Beatrix really shines. This fight is built around her kit. So for example, her LD can instantaneously remove all 6 framed buffs from the boss, as well as apply a framed debuff on the boss that will allow her to continuously dispel the boss each time she attacks them, which helps to keep the Lufenia Orb at a very fresh count. In addition to that, Beatrix also of course has her Holy Knight protection, which will completely negate the recast attack from the boss. So Beatrix alone will deal with the recast ability and the Lufenia Orb, which means that you only need to bring in characters to complement Beatrix in terms of DPS and to somewhat mitigate the dangerous attacks that the bosses have, such as their single target flurry of attack into HP damage. So for that reason, Gladiolus is also a very good team member. He will protect the rest of the party, and he will significantly reduce Brave and HP damage taken as well, and also provide a very nice passive HP regen ability for the entire party. Other notable characters, as I mentioned, if you want to go through the turn delay deletion route, Lion, Lightning and Cloud are key characters. Sephiroth with his burst ability can also help in that regards. In fact, if you bring 2 Lions, so your own plus a support, you can effectively delete the boss's turns to oblivion pretty much the entire fight. Other characters can include Reno, for example, who can provide a framed pyramid debuff so long as there's room for him to apply, which will also help you circumvent the deadly recast ability from the boss. However, he does need to time it properly, because if the bosses do any other action, it will remove the pyramid debuff, so it is a little bit tricky in terms of timing. Vanille, being another synergy character, also takes a special mention here, because if you don't happen to have Beatrix, Vanille can also help you dispel all the buffs through her dispel ability, and because she's synergy in this event, she does deal considerable damage still, despite being a support character. And of course, she provides a very nice attack and defense down debuff as well, which will help the rest of your party. So that's it for this video. As always, if you enjoyed this video, do leave a like, comment or subscribe. If you have other strategies, of course, that you would like to share, feel free to leave it in the comment section as well to encourage a healthy discussion. Till then, I'll see you in the next Lufenia fight video. See you!